Welcome to Champion This podcast with Brianna, Salvatore, Dueck, and Chelsea Poppens, where we share the incredible stories of athletes and entertainers who are using their platforms to create positive change in the world and the communities they live in.
Today, we are fired up because we have Cici Bellis on the podcast. Cici has an incredible resume and bio. She's a former professional tennis player. She was the youngest player in the top 100 of the WTA rankings in 2014, and she reached the third round of the US Open in 2014 at just 15 years old. She won her first WTA title in 2017, the Hawaii Open, and has secured several ITF titles before she decided to retire in 2022. Initially, she had actually committed to Stanford, but decided to turn pro, forego that college experience, but then later completed her degree online at Indiana University, she's also now the CEO of Carton Capital, which is a forward-thinking venture capital firm focused on the sports and health tech markets. And in addition to all of this, she volunteers with the USTA Foundation, who has a mission to bring tennis and education together to change lives. Welcome to the podcast, Cici.
Thank you guys. Awesome bio. Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's always funny when we repeat people's accolades and accomplishments back to them in the beginning. They're like, wow, I sound pretty cool.
Love it.
Well, we want to kind of dip our toe into the conversation and give our listeners a better idea of you and your background. But we like to start kind of talking about your journey in sports. And you've obviously had an incredible and successful tennis career, as we mentioned in your bio. Can you take us back to the moment that you fell in love with sports and why tennis kind of became your favorite sport?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was one of those kids that played every single sport growing up. Pretty much everything from swimming to soccer to gymnastics, tennis, you name it. And I tried it out or I played it. So I really got to see, a ton of sports and enjoy a ton of sports, kind of narrowed it down to soccer and tennis as I got older. And, was kind of thinking through which one I really wanted to focus on as, I started entering my teen years. And a lot of things jumped out to me with tennis. I really liked the individual aspect of the sport. I kind of liked the idea of, being able to work super hard and really see the kind of results pay off, in tournaments and kind of have everything be on my shoulders at the end of the day. So that was one of the main reasons why I chose tennis. I really like the competitive aspect of it. And, it's really kind of like a lifelong sport. So thought I can enjoy it for a super long time, and I still do, which is awesome. And I think I fell in love with it initially when I first started playing when I was 5 years old, when I hit my first tennis ball or something. But it grew and grew and decided to focus on it probably around 12 or 13 more seriously.
Nice. That's incredible. And what's wild is you went professional at such a young age. As we mentioned, you were the youngest player in the top 100 of the WTA rankings. You competed in the US Open as a 15-year-old. Me as a 15-year-old, I was high school gym, shooting hoops, hoping to become the next Diana Taurasi, but didn't quite make it that far. But it's just that's so wild to think that you were able to make it to that stage at such a young age. What was it like to kind of be thrust onto the massive stage and into the limelight at such a young age?
Yeah, it was crazy. That first US Open, it was kind of funny how I got into the tournament. It was through a national junior tournament that the prize for winning, it's our biggest national junior tournament called the USTA Hardcourt. It's if you win that tournament, you get a wild card into the US Open. And so that's how I ended up getting in at that age. It was crazy for me because I'd really not played any professional tournaments prior to that. I'd played one of the lowest level ITF tournaments, so nothing near US Open. That was the craziest kind of experience to be thrown into that. But I really enjoyed it. I always really enjoyed playing in front of a crowd and had people watching. I felt like that always brought the bigger moments brought out the best in me. So it was crazy, but super fun and really grateful for that opportunity.
Were you nervous, or did you have any fears or jitters of being on that stage and being in that kind of high pressure scenario?
Totally. Yeah. I was someone who, always felt nervous before any match I played. And I always looked at it as a positive, meaning, I cared about it so much and I wanted to do well. So absolutely felt nerves going in. I really didn't know what to expect, playing at such a high level. And I had, basically skipped from junior level right to the top level of pros. I had no really like in between understanding of kind of what the level was. So I was just hopeful I could get out there and, not embarrass myself. So I think that's what I was nervous about. And I think I did okay.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. On top of those emotions, how did you handle the pressure? Like, kind of how important was that mindset to your success? Did you have some coaches or people surrounding you that helped kind of like maintain those emotions or helped you like rebalance?
Totally. Yeah, I had a great team around me. Very close with my family, and they kept me, very grounded during that time. And then, my coach and I had a team that came with me to the event that really helped. And always worked with our national tennis center and their, mental training coaches and things like that. So felt like I had a good, head on my shoulders at that
You
age,
were
which
prepared.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
That's amazing. Me at 15, I was like forgetting my shooting shirt before the game.
Bree, you still forget things.
You're right. No, no, no. It's true. It's true. It's fine. Yeah, that's wild. How were other players on tour? Like, did you have any mentors or like, you're 15, you're at US Open. Did like, I don't know, did Serena come over and like, hey, Cici, you got this? Like, welcome to the tour, babe. Like, you're gonna crush it. Or like, was there anyone like that was really supportive?
I had a few mentors growing up. Chris Everett was one of my mentors, and
Awesome.
she worked with me really closely as I was getting older. So definitely owe a lot to her. And then a lot of the Americans, the top Americans, were so nice as I was coming in and playing. So I felt like I had a ton of support for sure.
Mm.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
We also we mentioned in the bio, so you had this offer from Stanford to go and play on the tennis team, but then you decided to go professional. Talk us through like your mindset and why you decided to go pro at that point in time.
Yeah, totally. So, Stanford was a huge dream of mine growing up. I grew up around the area, and always went to the matches and was so excited to whenever I was on campus. So that was a huge dream of mine. So it was super hard for me to make that decision, but I kind of had in the back of my mind that if I make it to the top 100 in the rankings, I felt like it would make sense for me to go pro at that point. I was giving up and forfeiting so much prize money at that point. It was silly, it felt like. And, for some
Mm-hmm.
players, I think college benefits them. They develop more during that time. They kind of like can grow into their body or grow into their game, whatever, it is. But, I think for a lot of players, it potentially slows down their progress. And for some reason, for me, I felt like it was going to do that to me. So I kind of had to make a decision like, do I really want to, try to play pro, try and, do this as a full career right now? Because I don't feel like it would, maybe be as possible if I went to college and did it after 4 years. So that was kind of my mindset. I had that ranking goal in mind. I ended up getting into the top 100 I think about 9 months before I was supposed to go to Stanford. So at that point, yeah, turned pro, decided to make the leap. Definitely one of the harder decisions I've had to make, especially at that age, for sure.
That's crazy to even think about, because like I didn't know that about tennis players, that a lot of times you guys forego going to college in order to pursue your tennis
Yeah.
dreams. And I'm sure there's a lot of our listeners that don't understand that process either. But like, kind of explain, if you do decide to go pro, like what is it like? Are they able to go back to college? Like, what does that kind of look like for a lot of players?
Yeah. So you can't go pro, take money, and then go back to school and play on a team. You could obviously go back to school, just focus on education, but tennis was such a big part of my life at that point. It wouldn't have made sense to just go for education, and I couldn't have kept up, I guess, the scholastic side of things while traveling full time. So
Yeah.
it would have been very, very hard to do that. And I don't even know if it would have been possible. So, yeah, it's really crazy. In tennis, I feel like the age is getting younger and younger where we see girls like burst onto the scene and be able to kind of like make an impact, at 14, 15, 16 years old. So it's pretty crazy how that's possible. But yeah, I feel like it's getting younger and younger, seeing
Mm.
girls at, early teens being able to take down a lot of top players. So definitely, an interesting dynamic, having girls, decide on college or pro. And I think, for everyone, it's a different decision, but, it's definitely, tennis is a sport where, you know, sometimes it helps to go to college and sometimes, it might not. So yeah, everyone's
Yeah.
different for sure.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure, for sure. So you won your first tournament or your first full pro tournament in 2017. It was the Hawaii Open. Can you talk to us about kind of that moment, that experience? Like, I'm sure this is a dream come true, win a professional tennis tournament. Like, what was that moment like when you scored match point and just kind of the experience of being on the big stage and winning?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it was amazing. It was so much fun and it was in such a like beautiful venue, so I feel like that made it even better. But yeah,
What island was it on for Hawaii Open?
it was on Oahu.
Okay,
Ooh.
nice,
Yeah,
amazing.
and it was great. It was, like, overlooking the water. It couldn't have been better. It was, like, the perfect venue, and, yeah, one of my best friends was there with me, to come watch, so we just had the best time, and, such a cool moment. I that was the, highest level of tournament I'd won at that point, and only had won, like, ITF level tournaments prior to that, so to be able to, like, make that leap and win a WTA was huge for me.
How old were you, after when you won that tournament?
That was when I was either 17 or 18, I can't remember. Yeah.
Okay, okay,
It was after I had decommitted to Stanford.
okay, okay.
Wow, you're
That
like, "Okay, choice well made." I think
Yeah,
that
it was
that is validation.
that
This was
definitely
True.
great.
helped.
Definitely helps to have the proof soon
100%.
after.
Yeah.
For sure.
So obviously you're very young. You're hyper focused on tennis, and then you decide to go play pro. What are kind of like some of the biggest hurdles that you faced going into that professional level, and how did you overcome them as a player?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was just how physical it is. The season is so long for tennis. We really have maybe a month break at the end of the year, and that's like considered our preseason. So it's not like you're really taking time off during that time.
Yeah.
So it's a super long season. These girls are built like pro athletes, as you can imagine. So
Mhm.
you're constantly putting your body through really tough situations. Day in and day out, especially if you're going far into these tournaments. You're playing matches every single day, really tough, grueling matches. So I think the physicality took a while for me to really adapt to. And, maybe my body didn't ever adapt to it given the injuries that I had. But I think that was the biggest thing for me coming from, kind of the junior level where everyone was kind of like the same age, the same, height,
Mhm.
build, everything at like, 15. And then you go and you're playing like a 32-year-old who's like so
Yeah.
strong and like built. So it was so different. But I guess that's what makes it, the pro tour. But that was something that I had to really focus on when I turned pro, is kind of like strengthening and the physical side of things.
Yeah.
You talked to us on the prep call, kind of how you were mostly on the court training, and then at what age did you actually start adding like that strength training aspect to it?
Yeah, a little bit before I turned pro, I was training mostly at our National Tennis Center, the USTA, and kind of when I moved out to Florida at that point is when I really started doing a lot of off court training in addition to on court. So up until maybe I was like 16, 17, I didn't do a ton of off court training in terms of lifting, but I really started that as I kind of like later teens.
Mhm.
Mm.
So I don't know about you, Chels. I'm sure Cece, you've watched it, but there's the Netflix series Match Point. Am I saying,
Oh
or
yeah,
is it
break point.
Breakpoint?
Mhm.
Breakpoint, yes. So I've been loving it because I'm like learning about kind of what goes behind the curtain in the tennis world. But I'm curious for you, kind of being on tour for so long. You mentioned you have 1 month of like fake preseason, but really having no break. Were you able to build community on tour? Because tennis is also like more of an individual sport, and it's like these are your competitors, but also I imagine there's camaraderie. But yeah, like what was that like?
Totally. Yeah, it's such a funny dynamic. I had most of my like best friends in life are from tennis, whether it's from junior tennis or pro
Yeah,
tennis, and have stayed into like in my wedding last year, they were all people that I met, through tennis, most of them.
yeah.
And so I owe tennis so much, just given those like incredible friends. It is definitely there is a dynamic where you are playing against these people. So some are a little bit more, some girls are a little more standoffish, but I'd say most of the time there's a pretty good camaraderie. especially with the girls that are like, at tournaments week in and week out with you for sure.
Do you have like your arch nemesis like that
Not
you
really.
no?
No, not really.
Not that she shares out loud.
No name
On
dropping.
the
We don't need to
podcast,
like
yeah.
plaster a photo of whoever they are up.
Oh my gosh. No. Yeah, no, didn't really have an arch nemesis. I feel like it was so funny. Like, as a tennis player, you literally, most of the time, you're losing every single week. Like, it's rare that, you win a tournament during a week. So, everyone's kind of in the same boat. It's not like there's, especially on the women's side, there's so much depth in tennis.
Yeah.
It's not really the same people, besides a few that will make it far. It's pretty much different people every week, winning tournaments or getting far. So I think that's what makes it interesting too, is everyone kind of has their weeks during the year.
Yeah, totally.
Kind of going back to, you mentioned you had a couple of injuries. What types of injuries, or how serious were the injuries that you had?
Yeah, I had a couple like wrist tears, and then some elbow. I had an elbow tear. I had some like bone
When you
spurs
say
in my
tear,
elbow.
is it like the ligaments
Yeah.
around it?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. Pretty serious on my wrist. Serious enough where they had to like not only repair the tears, but like break one of my bones to shorten it to prevent tears in the future. So it was, pretty barbaric.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, not super fun, but ended up getting through that. And my elbow was the one that finally like kind of kept me out for a little bit too long, and just felt like I'd been in that cycle for so long, and then was kind of considering other options. So yeah, definitely not super fun, but it's not like it's, affects me daily or anything now. Like, I can still go play tennis and enjoy it a ton. It would be tough to put my body under the stress of like training day in and day out, like as a professional. It would be impossible now.
Yeah. Would you say those ultimately led to you to kind of like make the decision to retire from the sport?
It is, yeah. So
Yeah.
my elbow was the one that fully made the decision for me. I gave it kind of like one final shot for a surgery on my elbow, and it kind of didn't really do a ton. And so I just felt, I'd been through a couple surgeries, few years of kind of like the same like chronic style pain, and it was right when I was finishing my undergrad degree, and just felt like it was, a time that I could pivot and do something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bree and I get that.
Yeah.
Our
It's
knees
refreshing
were
too.
old and
Long
dusty.
Oh yeah.
It's rough. 4 knee surgeries later, I'm like,
So
oh,
tough.
well, okay,
Oh
we're
my
still
gosh.
out here, but
Yeah.
I'm curious, Cici. So tennis, from my point of view, feels like one of the sports that for a while has gotten it more right on the gender equality front than other sports.
Mhm.
But I'd love to hear your experience, because I know, like, for example, Chelsea and I, basketball is having a moment right now. Like, TV ratings for the WNBA are up year over year. Like, I think they've doubled this year. It's insane, the rise and growth of women's basketball and women's sports more largely. But tennis has been one that we look to as like, hey, they've got like more or less better gender parity and
Yeah.
equality in that sport. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that? What still needs to happen in that space?
Yeah, tennis is doing a really great job. I think they've been kind of like the thought leaders in terms of gender like pay equality. I think for a lot of other sports. So super super grateful for that. Women have the same prize money at the Grand Slam level and at the Masters 1,000 level for tennis. So which is absolutely huge,
Yeah.
and really like change the sport. We don't have the same pay at levels lower than Masters 1,000. Men get paid quite a bit more at lower levels. So like WTA 250 through to the 1,000 level. So, 1,000 and slam, amazing. We could, a little more work on the lower level tournaments, but they're doing a great job overall.
Yeah. What do you think has led to the gender equality? And obviously there are like mavericks like Billie Jean King who really more largely what she's done for sports. It's insane. It's incredible. But would
Yeah.
you liken it to women like Billie Jean King who've really kind of fought for that equality from the get-go? Or yeah, any theories on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Billie Jean really kind of like started the equality movement for us for sure. And then, there have been major athletic stars come out of tennis, like the Serenas of the world. And a lot of players that fans really love, aside from that too. So I think, it's an interesting enough sport, and it's, we have these like massive champions and legends that come out of it that really kind of fuel what Billie Jean has done.
Totally.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Before we jump into kind of the next play of your career, I wanted to just ask you one quick question. Cici Bellis today, giving advice to Cici Bellis as a 13, 14-year-old, maybe 15-year-old the moment you turn pro. What would you say to her?
Oh my gosh, such a good question. I think, I was someone that enjoyed really every moment that I played, and I think I would continue to tell myself that, and not be too hard on myself with the injuries and, worry too much about that. I think, up until I had my first injury, I think I was like smooth sailing, and then, you guys have gone through the same thing, like so tough, going through the injuries, the surgeries. I think being a little easier on myself maybe during that time, and just knowing everything is going to be fine and work out. But yeah, I think, yeah, just enjoy even those moments that were harder during the surgeries. Try and enjoy them as much as you can.
Hmm. So you so you retired actually like in 2022, right?
No, that was when I made the announcement. I officially, I guess I stopped playing a couple years prior to that.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so I've
And
been out
so
for a bit now.
okay, so what was the year that you actually decided to kind of start dive into venture capital and get more interested in that, and then ultimately found Carton Capital?
Yeah, so I started interning back in 2020 for a venture firm, and yeah, loved it. Stayed there for about 4 years, and then or almost 4 years. And yeah, I think my kind of like the athlete side of me, kind of that like budding, almost entrepreneurial, side in a way, being an athlete was really kind of coming through and started to get the itch to build something on my own. So decided to leave that firm last summer, and launch Carton about a year ago.
Wow, that's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
I've can you kind of give our listeners a little explanation of what venture capital is? Because I don't think a lot of people actually understand what it is. They might have like a baseline understanding,
Yeah.
but coming from you and like from your experience in it, I think it would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, venture capital at its core is investing in early stage startups, usually at like a firm level. So, I started in venture at a larger firm that was focused on early stage startups. And right now, what we're doing is we're focusing slightly later, but still venture, so still early stage startups. So basically, you're giving these startups money for a portion of equity into the company in hopes that they end up either getting acquired or it's called like exiting or IPOing one day.
Hmm.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
So, can you talk to us about your why for being in venture? Like, what about that space excites you so much? I think as an outsider, I'm like, it feels like you get to be someone's coach, teammate, like hype woman. There, it seems like there's some really cool kind of soft skills that like you're amazing at that probably make you great at it. But yeah, I won't take words out of your mouth.
No, I love that. Oh my gosh. I I love that so much. I think absolutely. And I grew up in the Silicon Valley, so I grew up around venture from, a really young age, and it always interested me. And that was actually something I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted as a career kind of post tennis, whether it was post Stanford or post tennis career. And yeah, it was kind of a coincidence how I got involved with the firm that I started at. They were a mile down the road from where I was training in tennis. So it was pretty funny, but yeah, I think that was initially just growing up around it was what kind of sparked the interest, and I feel like it's a really dynamic type of industry, and it's something new every day. I get to work with people that are incredibly passionate about what they're doing, and it's in spaces that I'm incredibly passionate about. So I think it's kind of a win-win on every angle.
Mm. That's crazy that you really just took the leap in 2023 to start up your own. What was that process kind of like to find your team, find the people that you wanted to work for you that matched your mission and values? Was that kind of difficult to find people who aligned with that?
Um, Not incredibly difficult, actually. I got super lucky. We have a couple team members now, and they were very, I don't want to say easy to find, but they were the ones that kind of reached out to us and initially started on as interns, and we're so excited about what we're doing that they wanted to be full time employees. So I think that was the easier side of it, but I would imagine in other scenarios how it could be a lot harder for sure. And how picky you would need to be. But I got super lucky for sure.
It's really easy to get excited about the sports space too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%. I feel like it just brings like the best people around you for sure.
It
it
really
really does.
does.
Yeah. So on that question, what types of companies more specifically are you looking to invest in? Do you have a specific criteria for how you make these decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. So, our thesis, kind of more broadly, is that we look at sports tech and health tech companies. So, on the sports side of things, we're very broad in terms of our thesis. That's where we can, support companies the most in terms of our network, our relationships, our experience in the space, and our mine, my advisory board, our investors, things like that. And some categories in sports, for example, like fan engagement's a category that we like to look at. We love to look at sports performance, obviously biased from my opinion there, but helping athletes. And there are a lot of like data and analytics and AI plays in sports tech now, so we see a lot of those. And then on the health side, we try and keep our thesis a little bit more narrow. We won't look too far into biotech or pharma, or anything
Hmm.
that requires, heavy clinical trials or anything like that. But more on the side of, wellness, fitness, nutrition, longevity, recovery, and femtech. Those are areas that we really love to look at. So technically kind of like sports adjacent, but they don't have to have
Yeah.
a sports element. It ends up being that a lot of the companies that we invest in on the health side either want to get involved in sports or have some sort of a sports angle, just given the fact that we're speaking with them. So that's our like thesis in terms of the verticals that we look at. And then stage wise, I mentioned Series A. So usually these companies have gone to market already. We don't have any strict revenue benchmarks, but usually the companies we invest in are doing like around 3 million in ARR. And we try and keep the requirements or benchmarks as loose as possible so we can
Yeah.
chat with as many companies as we can.
Totally. Are your LPs or your investors, are they also like a specific category? Do you have like athlete LPs, or is it pretty open to really just people that are passionate about kind of your thesis and the companies you invest in?
Yeah, so we have an athlete advisory board, and then in
Cool.
terms of our LPs, they're mostly like sports industry executives. We have a couple health industry executives, but very heavy on the sports side. So that can be CEOs of massive sports organizations, foundations, things like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, you heard it here first as CC raises for Fund 3, Fund 4, where you know where to find her. This woman is a powerhouse, and I would get on board.
Yeah. So as a former pro athlete, obviously you are fiercely passionate about supporting women and helping them succeed and seeing them succeed. Is there any examples or like how have you been able to help champion female athletes and founders through your work at Carton Capital?
Yeah, so we try and focus on female founders whenever we can. So we have one out of I'd say like at least 20% of our portfolio is female founded companies right now, and definitely trying to keep that ranging upward. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like female sports, we see a ton of companies that are focused on female sports. We're advising a company that's focused on female sports right now. So trying to support them, as much as possible from, obviously a passion perspective on my end, but also, a potential return perspective from like an investment perspective. So,
Yeah.
we try and focus on female sports as much as possible. We see a ton of innovation in the space and we're so excited about it. So we have a
Yep.
couple that we're looking at right now that we're hoping to get across the line in female sports. And yeah, in terms of like I mentioned, female founded companies, trying to support female founders as much as possible as well.
Mm.
Yeah, and this is huge, right? Because I think I read a stat the other day that only 4% of all venture capital funding goes to women founders,
Yeah,
which is insane. Women are like graduating colleges at rates that are like higher than men. And I know there are also some other factors that go into that number. Maybe there are probably less
yeah,
female founders than men founders. So
Hmm.
it's not just, a 50% men, 50% women founding, and we're just getting no money. But
yeah,
nonetheless, like that number needs to change. And
totally.
having you at the helm of Carton Capital, being able to have an eye for those incredible female founders and women that are absolutely crushing it, I think is huge, and I think, yeah, so really excited to kind of see some of the work that you're doing in that space and that you'll continue to do in that space.
I love it. Yeah, we're super passionate about it. So you'll hopefully see a few more in our portfolio soon.
Woo, let's
Let's
go.
go.
Do you have any like favorite, like what do you love the most about being able to work in that space?
Oh my gosh, I think it's honestly working with the founders. I mentioned, they're just the most passionate, like hardworking people, and they're building in spaces that we're so interested in from like a personal level and an investment level. So I think it's just surrounding yourself with really cool people, really intelligent people that are really trying to change the world, change the whole landscape of sports and health. So yeah, I'd say the best part of my job is working with founders.
Mm.
That's amazing. And this might be a silly question, but like day to day, what are you doing? Like, what does it mean to be the CEO of a venture capital fund and just what does that mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, my days are usually pretty hectic. I split my time between startup calls, so like vetting future investments, diligence on current companies that we're speaking with, whether that's follow up calls, market research, financial diligence, company diligence, things like that. Hosting investment committee meetings with our IC members. Basically getting the red light or green light on investments, and network calls with other firms that we work closely with to exchange deal flow. We do, a ton of work with MBA interns, so trying to give them like the best experience possible while they're working with us. And travel a little bit for work, whether it's conferences or
Yeah.
events or things like that. But most of my days are spent, taking meetings either with startups or with other VCs, and then we try and connect as a team a few times a week just to go over different projects for the week, whether it's diligence or getting a newsletter out or
Yeah.
whatever it is. There's something always going on. I always joke, if I didn't need to sleep, I could work 24 hours a day. Like there's always something I could be doing. And of course that comes with starting a company. So I'm very excited about it. But yeah, it's a pretty hectic day, and I try and squeeze a
Yeah.
lot of those things in every day.
That's really cool. Thank you for that. And
Yeah.
I imagine too, kind of being a founder, as I'm venturing into this space, founding my own agency, I think about the importance of habits and also like rest, because it is pretty nonstop, right? You could work 24 hours a
Yeah.
day. It's not like when you're in school, you finish your assignment. Okay, cool. I'm free. I can do whatever.
You're
Like
done.
there's always something to do, and you have a team that you're managing. But I also know from sports, you know the importance of recovery and rest. If you just go hard 7 days in a row, you're going to freaking die. You have a game the next day. Like there's no way that you can be pushing 100% and perform 100% the next day. So yeah, how do you like weave in rest as a founder and like some of these
Oh,
habits that you
and
learn from
fun.
sports?
How do you
And fun.
have like
Yeah.
social and fun and rest? How do you have a life outside of being a founder?
Yeah, I would say most of the founders you speak to say they don't have a life. In terms of like startups that we speak to, at least. But sometimes it's a good thing. I think for a little period, I think, being super heads down on something is good, but absolutely rest needs to be incorporated. And, I try and unplug at least for a half day every weekend, maybe a full day, and try and do something fun, with husband. We have a dog, or family that's around. So try and do that. But, I feel like it's a hectic time of life right now, and something that I'm like enjoying, embracing, knowing that it will, slow down in the future at some point.
I think some people don't understand like when you're passionate about something and you're like you are having fun with work.
Yeah.
Work
Mhm.
does bring you fun and it's challenging, and some people don't understand that because they're like trying their best to get away from
Totally.
work to do everything else. But like when you love what you're doing, it just like it fills your cup, and like you kind of want to be doing it all the time, which
Yeah.
is very different from a lot of people's experience with work and relationship with work.
Yeah, totally. And it doesn't really even feel like work when you love it so much. So I
Hmm.
totally agree. I feel like that's the boat I'm in right now. So I feel super lucky.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, on top of being a founder, you work also very closely with the USTA Foundation, which serves kids in underserved areas, getting tennis rackets into their hands who otherwise don't have access to them. What kind of activities do you do with the USTA Foundation, and what kind of impact have you been able to see through your work with them?
Yeah, so I'd say maybe 10 times a year we host clinics in areas that aren't as fortunate, that maybe kids wouldn't think that they could play tennis, or have the resources to play tennis. So try and hold clinics for them, work with a lot of
In your free time.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
my free time. And again, like, doesn't even feel like work because I enjoy it so much. It's such a rewarding experience. So we do that. They host a lot of kind of like after school programs with the different chapters that they have. So support there as much as I can, but try and be on court with kids a lot.
Hmm.
I love that. Are there any like key messages that you share with kids? I know you mentioned we asked that piece of advice you would give to your younger self, but like what's a piece of advice you're giving to some of these young kids at these academies? Yeah.
You're like, get into venture capital.
Right.
Oh my gosh. I think, the biggest thing that I try and relay, no matter like what, background a kid has, is that if you work hard, you can really do anything in this world. You can achieve anything you want. As long as you put the time in, you have the dedication, you have the work ethic. So I try and relay that as much as possible. As I feel like that was kind of like a North Star for me. Growing up, I knew that I wasn't the same size as a lot of the girls I was playing against in tennis, but I knew that if I worked harder, I could, compete with them. So that was something that I always
Mm,
looked at from a different angle. But maybe for some of these kids that are in less fortunate areas, they're thinking, can I even play tennis? Can I even have the ability to do this or find the resources to do this? So I think if I relay that as much as possible, hopefully they'll take it and run with it.
Mhm.
yeah. And you are like such a walking testament to that. When I see you, Cece, and what you've done, I see limitless, I see bold, I see unafraid, I see coming in there like as an underdog, young, and just like, no, I'm here. I belong. I think that's so, so big. And I think we can sometimes take ourselves out of the game. You're like, oh no, I'm not the right age, or like I don't
Mhm.
belong here. But I think that like confidence coupled with incredible amount of work. You didn't just show up and step on the court, but like you were prepared and you've been disciplined. And same thing with starting your own company. Like you've put in the work, you're ready, you're confident to make it happen. So yeah, just really rings true. And I hear your story and getting to know you better. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's really something for everyone. If you do, put the time in, you have the work ethic, you want it, badly. I think that there's unlimited potential for sure.
Mhm. So before we get into our lightning round, I know you kind of already gave it advice, but just in case you have other advice you'd like to give, we always end our podcast by asking, like, do you have any advice for our listeners regarding achieving their full potential and using their giftings to share love and light to make the world a better place? Do you have any advice for them?
Love it. I think, the biggest thing was for me, at least, in my North Star was what I just mentioned, putting the time in. But I think, that can go hand in hand with helping others as well. If you see someone that, or know someone that could use extra help, or could use extra help, maybe following their dream, I think help them as much as you can. Because what goes around comes around, in my opinion, for
Hmm.
sure.
Hmm.
Love that.
Exactly.
Okay, so we are now on to our lightning round.
Pew, pew,
Love
pew. Let's
it.
go.
So essentially, you have 30 seconds to answer each of these questions.
Okay.
If you go a little longer, it's fine, but yeah.
Love
So
it.
our
Love it.
our first question is, who's the toughest competition you've faced on the tennis court?
Definitely Serena. Played her. I played Venus too. So those two are tough ones for sure.
Yeah. What was that
Yeah.
like? Sorry, I know it's only supposed to
We're
be
going to
30
expand
seconds,
on that.
but
We need
what?
more.
Okay. Don't worry. Yeah, it was wild. I think it was kind of like a surreal moment for me, because I looked up to her and watched her on TV. Pretty much every week growing up. So it was scary in a way, but also looking back on it, such a cool experience.
Hmm. Hmm.
So cool.
That's great. All right, second question. What was your pregame routine? Did you have any weird superstitions?
Usually if I was at a tournament and doing well, I would like go to the same restaurant every single night, something like that.
Okay.
Just because I felt like it was working. I love music, so listen to a ton of music. Had
Genre?
um, either like rap, hip hop, or maybe pop before matches, I would say.
Nice. Nice.
Um, and then yeah, had like I tried to keep like a similar practice routine before matches if it was working.
Mm.
Love it. It's so funny. My like pre-game basketball music compared with everyday music is like
That
what?
yeah, 100%.
It's all about the vibe. It has to
Yeah,
be the right
It
environment.
really is. Very aggressive. Very
yeah.
It's the
Everyone would
best.
think you're like crazy
It's
if they
true.
like put on your headphones or something. But yeah,
Yeah,
gotta do it.
totally. Okay, next question. What is your most epic tennis moment?
Tough. I would say either when I won my first WTA title, or probably that first time I played the U.S. Open when I was 15.
Mm, those are pretty epic.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, last question. If you could get dinner with any person in history, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, this is such a tough one. I feel like I could go down so many like paths for this, like favorite athlete, favorite like business person. Um, I think, in terms of athletes, if I could have like a table of the best athletes of all time, I think that would be like the coolest thing ever for me.
That would be
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
I love that. You're like, "I'll take your question and I'll make it my own." It's
I
like
like
all the best
I feel like
athletes at once.
I get asked this a lot, and it's tough for me to like think about the different path I want to, go down, whether it's,
Totally.
maybe a business, type mentor, or whether it's athlete or, whoever it is. But I think having like a table of the best athletes ever would be pretty awesome. Maybe the best
For
female
sure.
athletes ever.
Yes, let's
Yeah,
go. We love it.
love it.
Well, Cece, that brings us to the end of our time for this podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Loved our conversation.
Same.
For our listeners out there, we're going to link all of Cece's social media profiles, the link to her website, Carton Capital, and you can follow along in the show notes for all this information. But yeah, thank you so much, Cece. It's been so, so great.
Oh, thank you guys. I had a blast. I appreciate it.